Back in my sophomore year at Crestwood Middle in high school, a well-to-do district nestled in upstate New York, field trips were a big deal. Being part of the school choir meant I got to join in on some of the best ones. That November, our chorus group took a trip to Pinecrest Lodge, a remote resort in Pennsylvania known for its serene lake and dense surrounding woods. The bus ride was long and quiet. I was sharing a room with my friend Ethan, and from the moment we arrived, the place felt off. The cold November air seemed to seep into the very walls of the lodge. We had 3 days planned, with 4 chaperones who mostly let us roam freely, only asking us to check in about our activities. Day 1 was a blast. Ethan, 2 girls from our group, Maya and Genwind, I raced go-karts, climbed the indoor rock wall, and even swam in the chili pool before dinner. But when night fell, everything changed. Our room was on the ground floor, with a sliding glass door that looked out over the lake, shimmering under the pale moonlight. We left the blinds open, drawn to the eerie beauty of the reflection. Little did we know that moonlit view would be the beginning of something terrifying. Around 10 p.m., as we were settling in, Ethan suddenly screamed. I froze, heart pounding, and looked toward the door. There, pressed against the glass, was a tall, gaunt woman with long, tangled gray hair. Her pale hands framed her face as she stared inside, her eyes cold and unblinking. Then, just as suddenly, she turned and disappeared into the night. Ethan looked at me, silently pleading for courage. We both bolted outside, but the grounds were empty, no sign of her anywhere. The silence was suffocating. The next day, we kept quiet around the chaperones, but confided in Maya and Jenna. That night, determined not to be caught off guard, we shut the blinds tight. Ethan fell asleep first. I stayed awake a little longer, but then I woke suddenly to a chilling silence. Something felt wrong. I whispered Ethan's name and no answer. I turned toward his bed but couldn't see him. Something was blocking my view. And then, towering over me, was the same tall woman. She took a step back and hissed, "Your back door was unlocked," before turning and vanishing once more. Frozen with fear, I woke Ethan. We locked every door and window, pulled the blinds tight, and vowed to stay awake until dawn. When morning finally came, we rushed to the dining hall, desperate for normalcy. But normalcy was nowhere to be found. Back in our room, through the glass of the neighboring suite, we saw her again. The woman sat rigidly on the bed, hands folded, staring straight at us. We ran to the front desk, reporting her to the staff instead of the chaperones. The staff seemed uneasy, unsure how to handle the situation. Eventually, they accompanied us to the woman's room. Inside, she sat as before, but now an older man was there too, sitting silently on the other bed, his eyes vacant and unsettling. We later learned the woman suffered from severe mental illness, and the man was equally disturbed. Neither belonged at a family-friendly resort, yet the staff refused to remove them. After heated arguments between chaperones and staff, the trip was abruptly cut short. We packed up and left Pinecrest Lodge behind, Ethan and I both relieved to escape its shadow. But sometimes, late at night, I still wonder what if that woman was more than just a troubled guest. What if the lake's reflection wasn't just moonlight, but a window into something far darker? When I was in 5th grade, my class took a field trip to a small wildlife sanctuary called Willow Creek Preserve, about an hour's drive from our school in Maplewood. I remember that day clearly. It was overcast, with thick gray clouds hanging low, and every now and then a cold raindrop would fall, making the air feel heavy and uneasy. Willow Creek was modest, nothing like the big city zoos. It was designed for kids, with a handful of animal enclosures mostly housing small, harmless creatures. There were no exotic beasts, just rabbits, foxes, and some birds. The centerpiece of the preserve was an old stone building known as the Heritage Hall, where taxidermies animals were displayed alongside strange artifacts and curiosities I barely understood at the time. Back then, I was a quiet, somewhat odd kid often lost in my own world. My teachers and my mom noticed my odd behavior, but no one really understood it. On that trip, while our group was touring Heritage Hall, I slipped away unnoticed and ducked into one of the bathrooms. I did what I needed to, washed my hands, and stepped back out into the dim hallway. The lighting was low and moody, casting long shadows over the deep crimson carpets that lined the floor. My 8-year-old imagination ran wild as I stared at the glass cases filled with lifeless stuffed animals frozen in eerie poses. The silence was thick, broken only by the faint creak of the old building settling. Suddenly, I froze. From behind a stack of folding chairs, a man emerged, clearly trying to hide. At first, I thought he was playing a prank, and I even chuckled nervously. But then he stepped closer, his eyes cold and calculating. "Where did your group go?" he asked quietly. "I don't know," I replied, unease creeping into my voice. Without warning, he grabbed my hand and pulled me along. I thought he was just leading me back to the others, so I didn't resist. He took me to a side exit behind the building, near some rusty dumpsters and a couple of weathered benches. Beyond that, the dense woods loomed dark and silent. Outside, his grip tightened, his tugging becoming rougher. He was dragging me toward the trees. My stomach twisted in fear. I felt like I might be sick, but I didn't scream. Then, piercing the tense silence, a woman's scream shattered the air. It was one of my teachers, shouting from the other side of a chain-link fence. The man released me instantly and vanished into the forest like a shadow. Moments later, several teachers rushed out through the same exit, pulling me back inside. They scolded me for wandering off, but also wrapped me in frantic hugs, their voices trembling with worry. They called my parents, and the field trip was abruptly ended. The preserve's owners contacted the police, and soon the buses were loaded up to take us home. As our bus pulled away from the parking lot, I glanced back and there he was. The man crouched in the woods near the road, hidden behind a thick branch, watching us leave. For reasons I still don't understand, I said nothing. Maybe I was too scared, too shy, or simply too stunned to speak. The other kids eyed me strangely on the ride home, but I didn't care. All I hoped was that the man never succeeded in snatching another child like me. Back in high school, I took a class called Legends in L'Aurore, something like that. I can't quite remember the exact name, but it was all about real-life mysteries and creepy stories. I loved that kind of stuff. I took the class with my good friend, who I'll call Jake for this story. One day, our teacher surprised us with a field trip to an abandoned village not far from town. The village, Hawthorne Hollow, was built in the early 1900s, but had been deserted almost as quickly as it was established. The bus ride was about 20 minutes, and all of us were glued to the windows as we approached. The road leading to Hawthorne Hollow was sketchy and cracked, overgrown path slicing through dense, whispering woods. Eventually, the road opened into a clearing, and there it was, the village. The asphalt beneath our feet was cracked, and wild grass pushed through the gaps, reaching up to our knees. The buildings stood tall and archaic, their brick facades crumbling, windows boarded up or shattered. The whole place exuded a chilling, forgotten vibe. Our teacher lined us up, counted heads, and then led the way. The goal was to use the skills we'd learned in class to piece together why the village had been abandoned so suddenly. As we explored, Some buildings had holes in their walls' makeshift entrances. Near a few, there were holes dug into the ground, apparently to reach basements below. It was unsettling. But one building towered over the rest, an old factory or mill, its silhouette jagged against the gray sky. It fascinated me the most. While the teacher guided the group toward the village church, Jake and I slipped away, drawn to that towering structure. Near the back door, which was sealed shut, we found a hole dug into the earth. A rusty ladder descended into darkness below. We exchanged a look, no words needed, and Jake went down first, then me. Luckily, our phones had flashlights, a new feature that made the descent less terrifying. Inside, the basement was eerie. Dusty wooden planks scattered everywhere, a few empty beer bottles, and graffiti scrawled on the cracked walls. A narrow wooden staircase led upward into complete darkness. Since we'd come this far, we decided to climb it. Each step creaked ominously beneath me, as if the century-old wood might give way at any moment. Jake followed close behind. Upstairs, the space was cramped, with narrow hallways branching off into tiny rooms. It was so dark inside, you'd never guess it was daytime outside. Jake and I were starting to feel seriously creeped out and agreed it was time to leave. But then a sudden noise. Something heavy dropped in one of the rooms nearby. Our instincts screamed to run, but we froze. We locked eyes, then cautiously tiptoed toward the source. We shined our flashlights into the room, and what we saw made us bolt without a second thought. 3 men stood about 10 feet away, arranged in a strange formation, silently facing us. Their presence was so calm, so deliberate, it was terrifying. We didn't stop running until we were back down the stairs, up the ladder, and outside, gasping for breath. We caught up with the group but said nothing to avoid getting in trouble. Later, a classmate asked what had happened. We told him about sneaking into the building and seeing those 3 men standing there, waiting. As we rejoined the group, we kept glancing back at the tall building. Before we left, I caught a glimpse of a face at a high window, one that wasn't boarded up. Someone was watching us. We never told the teacher. We didn't know what to think. Were those men just homeless squatters? Gang members hiding out? Or Jake's theory, freaks me out, were they ghosts? The restless spirits of Hawthorne Hollow's long-gone residents? That image of the 3 men standing silently in the dark doorway haunts me to this day. Maybe one day, I'll go back to Hawthorne Hollow to prove Jake wrong. Or maybe not.